My name is Jason Hayworth, and I am the Chief Product Officer at Apica. With me is Daniel Bengtsson, our Director of Customer Success. So when we talk about mitigations in most environments, what you're really talking about is something that does something when a thing occurs that's supposed to kind of maybe not make it as painful. So there's lots of ways to talk about this, but we tend to start thinking about this as a tactics perspective. So tactics from a Apica perspective is doing threshold setting, using if-then logic statements, stack criteria sets, include data streams, so things that will be good enrichments for your data set as you're trying to create these presentation layers, and then make sure that you notify the correct team to reduce the signal to noise ratio. SNR is a huge problem in every environment, especially when you're talking about multiple tools. We're trying to give you effective information that can be used in a timely manner to solve a problem without making people wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning to go solve this actual problem. We can use multiple different channels to do this. We can use the Apica alerting system, which can send out SMS, email, those kinds of things, or we can do integration partners like ServiceNow, PagerDuty, Slack, all those kinds of pieces. We have API call functionality, so we can call an API, something like Lambda or some cloud function, Azure Automation, or people can actually call our own APIs with Apica callbacks, so we can do additional checks, additional functional elements, or we can collect more information as a result of that. So we can grab log data from something like CloudWatch or Prometheus. We can grab network information like TCP dumps, trace routes, ICMP. We can pull DNS information so that we know where you are going. And we can do application where we do additional object calls or component level checks to get more granular information. But the whole point of this is that eventually you want to be able to heal thyself. You don't want to have to wait for something else to do these pieces. So we can do things like spin up or restart a new instance in the infrastructure, resolve routing issues such as doing BGP updates, fix DNS issues for down issues, modify security rules, which I can't stress enough how important that can be in a certain scenario. Like, hey, everyone seems to be hitting this site and it looks like it's crushing all of my login variables. Oh, and it looks like it's all coming from a certain set of IP addresses in a particular part of the world. Why don't we block those in the ACL automatically instead of letting these threshold parameters go through? You let you roll back changes. So that way, if you make a change somewhere and you know that this thing is giving you an issue, part of your mitigation tactic could be to go through, run these pieces, run this test. Hey, it looks like everything broke. Well, we should be able to undo this automatically in the system after a certain period of time. We can enable that. And you can test in your blue-green environments before sending to green. So we got a demo coming up. We're talking about setting thresholds, data included in the collection, selecting the right group and channel, collecting more info to provide context, and then we'll do a quick presentation around the Apica UI and API, and then talk about the Grafana plugin.
This demo is going to be a little bit more about how do we use this data and how do we get notified if something goes wrong. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is alerting. So now we have all these monitors running here 24/7. If something goes wrong and one of these crashes, we wouldn't really know. So part of setting this up is, of course, to attach alerts to this so we get notified. And I'll show you a couple of different ways we can alert on this data.
So what exactly is this data? What's the story behind this one?
So this is the same type of checks we've been talking about. So I have several different check types here. We have a real browser running a login flow against a website. We have a script that is uploading a file to a host. We are streaming some videos to make sure that the stream is good. We are doing our chain API against Google API and Twitter. We are checking that we can connect to our VPN connection. We didn't look at this specifically. We have a real-time messaging in Gmail. So we have 2 Gmail windows, and we're sending messages back and forth and measuring that we receive them in a specific amount of time. And then we have 2 very simple checks here that is only hitting one website, one single URL, like a curl basically, one full page render where we only hit the start page of Gmail. So all these things together is important to us that they are up and running. And if something goes wrong, we can see here in the first graph that in this case, for example, we have one red dot in the first dashboard here, which means we had a failure here. but we didn't get notified. You see some of the other checks running here as well. We have yellow or orange dots here, which means it's a warning, maybe a threshold was broken. So the first thing we would do to kind of set up our alerting flow is to go into these checks and set our values for thresholds if we're interested in performance compared to availability. If a script fails, it will always notify if we have alert connected to it. But if you're also interested in performance, that it can't take longer than a specific amount of time to complete this user journey, we can also alert on that. So sorry, let me do this. I can reach it and that. So in this case, we have a real browser running from Ohio. I can go into the check settings, and we haven't covered this much, so I'll go through this as well. So per check, you have several different settings you can set. In this case, for a browser, we can set which value do you want to return. By default, we return a total browser render time, but you can set it to something else as well, DOM complete, for example. You can choose the version of the browser you're running it from, which location, the interval. Also, very useful is the max attempts, which means that if you run this script, it fails once. In this case, it's going to report an error right away, but you can choose to run this twice before actually returning back that it's a failure. So the first time this check runs and fails, it will not alert you. It will run again and try run again. If it's successful, then everything is good. So it's up to you how you want to treat your applications. If you want to know right away, you just set max attempts to 1. So as soon as it fails, I want to know about it. Do you want to enable a failover location? So for example, this runs from Ohio now. If it fails from here, go ahead and try and run this from another location, which would be the closest geographical location to Ohio. You can configure that as well, so you can fail over to a specific locations if you want to. You can set inclusion and exclusion periods. Let's say we have a service window every Thursday at 8 o'clock. Put in an exclusion here so the check doesn't run and send alerts. You can add custom headers to your scripts if you want to track this downstream in an APM tool or something like that, or to identify the data coming from the Apica synthetics. You can block specific URLs that we have touched a little bit on. And then we have some integrations directly here on the check level. If you want to pull back Akamai headers, you want to trigger a pure path in an APM tool or things like that to tie that together. You want to create snapshots in AppDynamics, for example. In this case,
just a question on this. Is there an API where I can do all of this, clicking checkboxes and so on in a script? Or
yeah, good question. Yes, we have everything you can do in the UI, you can do through the API. For example, setting all these checkboxes, creating a check, changing the location, pretty much everything you can do in the UI, you can do in the API. And then we get down to what affects alerting mostly, which is thresholds. So if you are very concerned about this taking longer, specific amount of time, you can say that, okay, if this takes longer than 4 seconds, that's an error. I want to have a warning if it takes longer than 6 seconds, for example. And you can do that as a constant value. You can do an average. You can do median and standard deviation for those if you want to have a more sliding scale for performance-based alerts. So once we have set a threshold for this, that means we have both performance-based monitoring and availability-based. So now I want to go ahead and set up an alert to make sure that if something goes wrong, I want to know about it. And there's several ways of alerting. So the most standard one is send a text message or an email. But most customers, they have some kind of system like ServiceNow or PagerDuty or the message to Splunk or something like that. So I'll show you the different ways we can send alerts. So here on in the manage alert section, we set up targets. And I have set myself up and Jason here. And for myself, I only set up my mobile phone and my email address. But if I wanted to add a PagerDuty integration to this or a custom webhook, and this is pretty powerful and very used by our customers. So we have a couple of pre-baked webhooks in here, which means that you can send messages to Ops, Genie, Slack, ServiceNow, Splunk out of the box. You just fill in your details for your accounts. Or you can use a custom webhook, which means that any publicly available API endpoint that you might have that we want us to post alerts to, you can configure that here. In this case, I'll just use our predefined alert targets, which is my email or text. So I'll go into one of the user journey tests here. Upload file. If I want to add an alert to that, I'll open that up. First thing I want to select, what do I want to be alerted on? Is it only on failures, for example, or is it even on errors and warnings as well? All right, so I want to be, as soon as there's a warning, error, fatal message, I want to get an alert. I choose my target and I'll send a text message. Or if we have specified a specific group, you can choose that as well. And then I create that alert. So now I have alerts for these two. So if something happens, it'll send me text message. One thing worth mentioning as well is when you set up your recipients, the targets for this, if you're sending to ServiceNow or you're sending a text message, you can go ahead and, sorry, pressed the wrong button here. You can go ahead and customize the message that gets sent. We have a default message. In this case, it says the severity for this check, the check name, and when it happened is, for example, fatal. But you can add whatever data you want in this alert message. We have a predefined set of placeholders. So we can say it ran from this location, or you can just say, okay, include a link to a runbook, for example. Go to Confluence/check error and flash this ID. So when you get this alert through whatever channel you have chosen, you can have a link to click to a runbook. How do I fix something when this happens? For example, a lot of customers have used this because they have an operation team that gets all these alerts day and night, and they don't know all the thousands of applications that are running. So they have a link to a runbook. Okay, if you get this alert for this application, click this runbook link and follow these steps to mitigate the error.
Yeah, or if there are known problems that keep happening over and over again, people will put custom messages in like, Ted, it keeps breaking. Ted, it keeps breaking. So they keep getting poked about the same thing over and over again until they fix it.
All right, so let's go into alerts and set that up. All right, so we'll go and find this one we had an alert set up for. Let's go ahead and change that. I'll send it to your email as well, Jason.
Perfect.
For everything. So while I continue and start showing the API, hopefully you'll get an email now and I might get a text here. All right, there we go. So now we have alerts set up for that check, and it should fail. And while that is happening, I'll go ahead and show you the API just so you see what's available there. So under the tools menu, and let me zoom in, we can go into the API, and this looks like, okay, it's finally loading. You'll have your authentication ticket in here, which you can cycle, so you don't have the same, so you get a new ticket every couple of weeks. You can get an example of the requests you make against the API here, just to get started on how you call the API itself. So if I choose one of these checks, it will pop up with a couple of methods on how you call our API. And you can click those right away and we get the results back from those. And then if you're interested in all the methods we have, just click the full documentation and open up a list of all the methods available. All right, so here's a full list. So we have a bunch of things for checks, which means create checks, enable, disable checks, get the results for checks, and locations. You want to change locations for different checks. You want to add locations. Check results is super important. A lot of customers use this API to pull our metric data into another tool to analyze data. Check jobs, you want to run it manually. You want to trigger something specific and something else happens. You can one check trigger another check, or however we want to do that. So there's nothing I know that's not available in the API that's available in the UI. Our alerts as well. You can set up users, you can set up roles and events. And I'm gonna get to my last demo here, which is graphing, because this is also very important. We can, how you display this data. We have built-in integrations with Grafana, and we have pre-built dashboards. So you can slice and dice, you can filter on tags, you can do deep dives into different dashboards from here as well. And also you can dive directly from here into the monitoring portal as well.